And Intellectual Property Authority, BIPA, will host an engaging stakeholder conference on the draft copyright and elated rights bill tomorrow. Ms. Vivienne Katjiuongua, Chief Executive Officer at BIPA, now joins us with all the details. Good morning, ma'am, and welcome to Good Morning Namibia.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Let's start by unpacking the bill as it stands and exactly what it entails, please.
Okay. So the draft copyright bill that we have is a document that came through a process of redrafting the current Copyright Act that we have. And I think the process has probably taken about 2 years, which is normally not such an extensive time period when you look at legislative drafting. Now, what it tries to do is to create a balanced system between the creative industry itself and then serving the interest of, for example, the community that it operates under. And what is more important is that it tries to preserve the integrity of the works of the creators of the works, but it also tries to secure income or a fund that can help assist for the development of the copyright system in the future. Because currently you find that we have artists, we have had COVID, and most of them would say that there was no income because they couldn't perform, and they normally only rely on the royalties that they get through actual performance or the what is the word, when their products are used or people listen to their music. And because people couldn't gather, their income has gone down. So it provides that security that at least can sustain the industry further. In addition, also it provides a platform where enforcement can be facilitated, because it gives powers, for example, to law enforcement and also the customs officials to be able to do things like searches and raids and really impose clear fines and other penalties to those who infringe the rights of the creators within the sector. And in addition to that, it has also introduced the protection of traditional folklore into perpetuity, so it doesn't have limitations anymore. And then there are various activities which are core to it, but what is really important, and if you speak to the artists, you'll see, is really the creation of this fund where they can at least rely on in the event of issues arising and so on, and that boost that they can get as creators.
Quite wide and far-reaching indeed.
Absolutely.
The balance that you made mention of that needs to be struck between the interests of the community but also the interests of the creators. Mm-hmm. Why is it important to regulate that by legislation?
So if you look at I suppose the community that we live in, certain things we sometimes take for granted, and especially creative things. I mean, you see them, they are created, you enjoy them, but you have no regard for the person who created it, because you accept that when it enters the public sphere, it's just something that can be used, but they have the right to claim based on them being the creators of this. So we have to strike a balance which would also not prevent such creativity from entering into the public space, because they inform, they educate, and they can transform society. So it's very important to have that balance of access for the public, but also the protection for those who are the creators.
I think you're raising a matter that speaks to the heart of the issue. Very often as laypersons, we don't realize it's actually theft that's been committed to use without authorization and or payment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's then get to what brought about these proposed amendments.
Okay. So the current legislation that we have is a legislation that is a 1994 Act. Now, normally legislation, if it's 1994, it means that there has been a period of development before that. Now, the era that we live in is an era that is driven by digital space and digitalization. And as you have seen with COVID, things have changed so fast, but you can imagine from 94 to today, it's 25 years that has passed, and there has been so many things that have evolved, and they are not catered for in the current legislation. So one has to look at how the digital space also has a direct impact on the creative industry, because remember, once you put your creativity, for example, on Instagram or on Facebook, anybody can access it. So you have to put in safeguards as to how would these people be protected and how can they actually reap the benefits of the creativity that they have produced. So it's really to step up and really join the globe as we are all moving fast, and to adapt, because with the digital space, things have to move fast, and we are still on a paper-based 1994 legislation. So we are far behind, but luckily where we are now, you can actually leapfrog, all the time that has passed. So the legislation brings in all the modernization that has taken place, and really to bring it into the space of the creative sector and ensure that they have the protection, they have the safeguards in place when they do bring their creativity out in the public and so on.
Now, and as much as legislation needs to be certain and needs to provide certainty, it cannot be static.
Yeah.
Ordinarily, how often would one need to review legislation for it to keep up with the times?
So legislation is tricky because you also don't want to review it that often. Then you create a sense of, insecurity or uncertainty. But you really have to look deep and see there are certain milestones that are reached at any given time. And that would inform you whether should we amend the legislation or we keep it the same. In intellectual property, where we are, for example, we have treaties that we would sign up to, or the country would sign up to, and then we have to domesticate these international laws. Now, that requires us to ensure that there is provision in the laws that we have for that. And we look also at society, because if we don't put that in law, they don't benefit from the changes that have taken place, which might be in their best interest. So you always have to keep a check and see, do we need to amend the law now, or do we wait a little bit because there are other changes that are coming. So you have to really look at the impact of that change that requires you to amend. And 1994 is a very long time ago, and the creative industry itself, so it's long overdue.
Very well.
Yeah.
Now, not only the buy-in, but also ownership by both community as well as creatives to accomplish that exact balance that we've been talking about.
Yes.
Please talk to us about the consultations that have been underway.
Okay. So copyright law, copyright and the related law, it cuts across borders. You will find a creator who sits in the UK and their works are displayed here. So it's not territorially bound. So when we engaged in consultation, we engaged locally, we did regional consultations, and we had input from across the globe, from experts on copyright, but also from the actual users and the creators of copyright. So it has been extensive. What is happening now is really for us then to engage, it's very important with legislation that you have consultations and you take into account the public's positions, because law is not created in vacuum. Law is there to serve us. So if those whom the law is supposed to serve don't have a buy-in or don't understand, how then do we just proceed and request Parliament to approve these laws and they enter into force? So they must be friendly and usable by those who would use them. And it's both. It's the creators as well as us as the community who benefit from the creations. So consultations are very important because they inform, they allow us then to cross-check what we have and see whether we have left anything out or we have taken into consideration things that might not be relevant to the Namibian community or copyright, for example, in its own complex way. So this is really an important platform where the stakeholders must come out, they must speak about it, and so that we ensure that what is in the law is really what is needed for this nation and the creators. Provided
it doesn't give rise to what we call in law absurdities.
Absolutely, because you always have to strike a balance. Everybody can give their comments, but their core principles that would always direct you. Is this what they are saying really going to aid, or does it really take us somewhere else and it goes contrary to the intentions why we are amending the law, for example, or what should normally be the basis of such copyright legislation. So it's a balancing act. So when we take into consideration the stakeholder comments, it doesn't mean that we would accept everything, but we need to justify, because when it goes to Parliament, they need to know why is that there, what is it supposed to be serving, and those are the discussions that are held when legislation is then presented for consideration.
Now, very well, we've touched on intellectual property theft. In practical terms, how will the bill, once enacted and it becomes law, help address theft and infringement of copyright?
Okay, so normally the laws would provide for the rights of the creators. It would also provide for what are the things that probably can be accessed without it being considered an infringement. So the infringements or the thefts, as you said, they would be specifically spelled out. And then it is for the one who is alleging then, who would have to take the matter and they can go to the police. For example, as I said, let me give a simple example of the customs official. So if you have things that are coming into the country, and then you have these infringements, it is at that point that they are empowered to use the law and probably seize these products or prevent them from being used for ulterior purposes and so on. So at least you create that system where people have access to enforcement and the law has teeth to bite, because we can't just have laws and say you can't, but when it comes to really enforcing, there is nothing. So that is what it tries to create. And as I said, it's not just the enforcement. What is lacking more specifically is the funding, because all of us, especially here in Namibia, we see the creative industry as something for enjoyment. You know, you go and see your favorite artist, whoever, and you just enjoy and you pay. But there is more to it, because these people are creators of things that are novel and they have the right to enjoy that exclusivity and the royalties that come from it. So it is in that light that you create a fund that is a fallback, because currently, you know, they rely on certain, a representative organization. But this organization also is supposed to be directed on how to manage so that the funds are used for the purpose for which they are being collected, instead of, you know, having these administration gaps and always going back to government looking for funding.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. In conclusion, please touch on tomorrow's conference.
Okay. So tomorrow's conference will be held at the Safari Court, and it's really for stakeholders to discuss the bill. It is live streamed, so there will be people who will be calling in from across the world. It starts at 8:30 in the morning and should end probably by, I think, 4 or so at the latest. So we will be engaging and facilitate the discussions around this bill, introduce it to the attendees, and then we discuss it step by step and take into account their inputs. Then we go back and we ensure that the inputs are addressed, if we include them or we don't include them, but we have a rationale why.
Your brief concluding remarks, please.
So I would like to really encourage those who are interested in the creative industry, directly or indirectly, to join us at the Safari Court. They can still register or join us virtually, because it's really important if we want to make this law work for this country and its creators and those who benefit from it.
Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your expertise, and may the deliberations be fruitful tomorrow.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to share with the nation.
Okuhepa.
Thank you.
There you have it, Ms. Vivienne Katjiuongua, Chief Executive Officer at BIPA, talking to us about the bill that will be discussed further at a conference in the capital tomorrow.